Hey guys, welcome to part 8 of Complex PTSD From Surviving to Thriving by Mr. Peter Walker. Continuing on, complex PTSD and the somatic therapy. Somatic, of course, referring to the body. There are also various somatic therapies that can help our bodies heal. As with my earlier comments about CBT, go back to part 7 if you don't remember what that's about. I would encourage you to be wary of somatic approaches that claim to heal complex PTSD without working on the cognitive, referring to the mental activity, and emotional levels described above or before. Some approaches, in fact, blanketly dismiss cognitive work in a way that sidesteps the crucial work of shrinking the inner critic. Some approaches also believe that their techniques eliminate the fundamental necessity of grieving. Key point, it's a fundamental part of healing. The fundamental necessity of grieving the losses of childhood and understanding how abusive and negligent parenting is at the root of our problems. Nonetheless, some somatic therapists can ease the physiological trauma that are locked in our bodies as long as the practitioner is not actively dismissing or impeding the client's cognitive and emotional work. It's a trifecta. You need all three: the physical body, the emotions, and the mental all need to be healed together in order for it to be sustainable, in my experience. In this vein, it is my opinion that techniques like EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing, and somatic experiencing are very powerful tools for stress reduction. They are especially helpful in resolving simple PTSD. However, they're not complete, complex PTSD therapies unless the practitioner is eclectic enough to be incorporating inner critic and grieving the losses of childhood work. Other helpful somatic techniques include Rosen work, Rolfing, rebirthing, and Reichen work. I don't know what those are either, except maybe the rebirthing. Maybe they'll explain it. These techniques can also be very helpful in aiding the recovery of the ability to therapeutically emote both tears and anger. For survivors of physical and or sexual abuse, I believe Rosen work is especially helpful. I'm going to have to research that because I don't recall ever hearing about Rosen work. I found that Rosen work's emphasis on soft touch helped heal my complex PTSD, startled response to physical touch. Do you have that startled response? I sometimes do. I don't often, actually. I know exactly when I notice it. I notice it at work. It was really bad when I worked in a kitchen and there was a lot of, no, that was noise. This noise makes me very jumpy, but here they're talking about touch. I'm kind of uncomfortable. Yeah, I'm kind of uncomfortable bringing up that. But I shall, for this is the purpose of this work. Yeah, there's a lot of times in my past history. It's getting cold outside, so all the flies are just snuck in during the day and are trying to keep warm in here. So if you see me swiping a lot, that's why. Even with lovers that I care deeply about, this included my husband, I remember when we would try certain things, specifically blindfoldedness. Something that was supposed to be fun turned very scary and trauma triggering very quickly. That's the specific experience comes to mind about trauma touchingness, I guess, triggering. I was blindfolded and was tied up because, I felt safe and I thought, oh, maybe this will be fun. No, I wasn't. Because even though it was my husband touching me, my body responded violently. So it was weird to have that happen because it was my husband and I totally trusted him, and yet taking away some of my senses and my ability to move got ugly real fast. Surprised us both. For survivors of physical and or sexual abuse, I believe Rosen work is especially helpful. I found that Rosen's work emphasizing on soft touch helped heal my complex PTSD startled response to physical touch. Yeah. A startled response is the sudden full body flinching that survivors experience at loud noises or unanticipated physical contact. And I just want to say to those of you out there who either have that response, let's start with us. For those of us that have those responses, I think the hardest thing is when it happens at work and people, any work. I mean, every work I've ever worked. People have responded to those flinching responses as if something was wrong with me, or if I was like maybe I was just off in space somewhere and they're bringing me back, or they laugh. A lot of times they laugh. I don't know, it's weirder or more uncomfortable of those responses. None of them feel good, and there's nothing you can do about it. Apparently, maybe this therapy Rosen work, definitely gonna look into it, but you're not alone if you get very agitated or I get angry and annoyed and embarrassed, sometimes angry, yeah, because we can't do anything about it. Maybe with this you can, but I hope so, because it's really frustrating. And for those people who are around trauma survivors, that they are aware of our trauma survivors, if you already know this, teach others. Just teach others. Teach as many people as you can. That such responses are it's like a reaction that cannot be in any way, shape, or form stopped that I'm aware of. Again, hopefully this Rosen work will help with that. Yeah. So, okay, I'll stop rambling. But it's very uncomfortable to flinch from sound or touch and have this full body. What a beautiful freaking... It's so amazing when you have it down. When all of a sudden you read it like I just did right now. Full body flinch. Scars of trauma. This is usually a somatic flashback to previous abuses. A startled response is the sudden full body flinching that survivors experience of loud noises or unanticipated physical contact. This is usually a somatic flashback to previous abuses. In my case, the startled response was installed in me by my parents through frequent face slapping. As a lap swimmer in public schools, it has taken me ages to significantly reduce being triggered by the hand and arm movements of people who swim alongside me. I also had to shop around to find a Rosen worker who welcomed my use of the verbal ventilation process, or ventilation, the act of bringing fresh air in. Some practitioners prefer to work in silence, and this limits or eliminates the therapeutic benefits of most survivors. It is also important to emphasize here that somatic therapies can be especially helpful in healing the anxiety reaction to touch and physical closeness that many survivors of physical or sexual abuse experience. Exceptions to this are the survivors that I have met who have experienced remediation, act of correcting an error, of this symptom through the help of an especially kind or safe partner. Moving on. The role of medication. As a psychotherapist, I am not authorized to give pharmaceutical advice. Okay, Mr. Peter Walker. But I have frequently noticed that survivors who need pharmaceutical help seem to benefit most from SSRI antidepressants. Taken at the right dosage, SSRIs do not usually blunt your effect in a way that makes grieving impossible. Moreover, if your critic does not budge with extended critic shrinking work, remember this critic is our internal critic or committee of critics. SSRIs can usually reduce its volume and vitriol meaning mean and angry words, enough so that you can effectively shrink it. I agree. I think I was taking SSRIs. Different anxiety medications that I was given. I remember it was an antidepressant anxiety medication, and I remember it helped immensely with the anxiety. But of all the medications that they tried on me, I gotta say, the Benbufrin, I think it was, definitely helped me. And everybody's different, so don't even forget I even said the name of it. Everybody's different. Everybody's gonna need different things. But yeah, I remember anxiety was the worst of everything because it was just put you into chaos. You couldn't breathe, so you couldn't sit still. You couldn't think straight. So yeah, I remember it took the edge enough for me to function. So that's my experience with medication that I do definitely recall it helping. Yeah. SSRIs can usually reduce its volume and vitriol enough so that you can effectively shrink it. Once it is diminished enough, you can dispense with medication, as I did. I walked away from a grip of medication. And all those, they had me thinking, they wanted to put me under so many categories. Don't let them put you under categories unless it helps you for that season. But I really look back at all the titles they gave me. I won't even repeat them because they weren't true. I know that because if they were true, 3 years later, I wouldn't be dysfunctional. And functional, peeps, I certainly am. Sober and very functional. So, I remember I initially took these titles that these doctors gave me as my dysfunctions as a relief. I remember being, not all of them, but some of them, like ADHD. I was like, okay, see? And out of all the ADHD medicines that they tried on me, I remember that there was Strattera that did work. And one that started with a P, but I forgot what it's called. That did work for a little bit before I started messing with my heart rate and everything else. Now, granted, I was an addict of other things, so I was a meth addict, so obviously if I hadn't been a meth addict, I'm sure the ADHD medication may have worked. But ultimately, back to what I was saying, at that time, it seemed to bring relief and clarity to my dysfunction, so that I could figure out, well, that's what I have. Let's figure out how to fix it. I've always been a problem solver. But here I am 3 years later. And I wish I could find the words to express how I did it, or why I did it, or how it came to be. But I'm not any of those things anymore. There's smidgets of it around, yeah, sure. But every month that passes, as I fall into gratitude more, as I make better choices, as I take care of myself, as I serve others with a smile on my face, I'm not depressed. I don't have anxiety. I don't live in regret or anger. I'm not an addict anymore, and I don't need any of their medications or their titles. I just need some good grub, some exercise, some hard work, and some chill, relaxing rest. So hold on to your titles of dysfunctions if it helps you understand your inner child work. If it helps you ask questions as to why. Why do I have this? What do they say causes this? And all that will reel you back to your childhood or very toxic relationships, if it wasn't that. But even it'll reel you back to the core of what ultimately is finding and healing your wounds, emotional, psychological, and physical. Once you start that journey, and if you continue on it, and if you start embracing life and stop living in the past, stop rat-tailing yourself into negative emotions, if you learn to direct your attitude and your emotions, which you are perfectly capable of, things will get better. Things will get better. I promise you. It just takes time and persistence. Moving on. I encourage you to get help from okay, here we go. For those who have been repeatedly, here we go. I forgot where it was. Once it is diminished enough, the critic or the committee of critics you have in your head, you can dispense with medication. True story. Once you start to love yourself and speak good things to yourself, you can dispense with medication. One caveat or warning: here is that unless you do extensive critic shrinking work, the critic will be as strong as ever when the medication wears off. Dun, dun, dun. True story. Self-medication. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I keep looking at all these freaking flies everywhere. I'm like, ugh. Where's my fly swatter? For those who have been repeatedly unsuccessful at stopping or reducing the use of non-therapeutic medications and substances, Gabor Mates, Dr. Gabor, one of my heroes. Gabor Mate is actually spelled, this is an important fellow you should know, especially if you've been diagnosed with complex PTSD or an addict. Gabor, Gabor, last name Mate, Mate. Gabor Mate's work on harm reduction may be helpful. Strongly, 100,000% recommend this gentleman, this doctor, Dr. Mate. Drug and alcohol recovery is beyond the scope of this book. But if you are stuck in habits of self-medication that are not allowing you to progress in your complex PTSD recovery, I encourage you to get help from a substance abuse recovery program or from a 12-step program like Alcoholics or Narcotics Anonymous. The number one thing I learned from going to NA was people, places, and things. Say it with me. People, places, and things. One more time. People, places, and things. Makes sense, doesn't it? You change your environment. You change what you think about. You change what you put in your hands or use, or places you visit, people you hang out with. Of course, you're going to recreate your world differently. It only makes so much sense. People, places, and things. Change them, and you will change your life. Working with food issues. Dun, dun, dun. Let us explore one last arena of physical healing. Where are we at? We're at 22 minutes. Let us explore one last arena of physical healing, and that is a dietary self-help. Totally been fighting this one for a long time. My mother was, I don't know. I presume she's. My mom had a big old problem with her weight. And yeah, I sometimes overeat, and I know it, and I'll be like, why are you overeating? And it's like, because that's what your mama taught you to do whenever you felt like shit. And that progressed into, well, that's just what you do. Why wouldn't you? Well, you stop and you ask your body, are you hungry? Or you try giving it better food. And for God's sake, cut off sugar, says the girl that bought cookies tonight. They were fancy cookies, so maybe they won't be as shitty. I don't know. This is Newman cookies. I'll continue. Working with food issues. Let us explore one last arena of physical healing, and that is dietary self-help. I agree with John Bradshaw, who says that almost anyone who grows up in a dysfunctional family has an eating disorder. This is a key factor in the digestive tract problems that are common symptoms of complex PTSD. Changing your eating habits is extremely difficult. A client left this quote on my waiting room bulletin board. Quote, alcohol and other drug recovery is like dealing with a tiger in a cage. Recovery from eating disorder is like taking the tiger out of the cage 3 times a day and then taking it for a walk. Okay. Deconstructing food addiction, then, is daunting work, especially when you work in a grocery store. A really good grocery store. Deconstructing food addictions, then, is daunting work that needs to be approached gradually and with a sense of compassion. Exactly. This is because children who are traumatically abandoned naturally turn to food for comfort. Food offers us our first outside source of self-soothing. And when a child is starving for love, he frequently makes food his love object. Yeah, I got really into toasting bread with jam on it and corn tortillas as like a preteen. With some salt and lemon on that tortilla. I was just eat it, sneak it. And that's when I started gaining a lot of weight when I was a preteen. Food offers us our first outside source of self-soothing. And when a child is starving for love, he frequently makes food his love object. Over the years, he commonly elevates it to the status of a drug, as I did. Moreover, increasing scientific evidence is showing that processed food products combined high levels of sugar, salt, and fat are especially addictive. Food addictions begin pre-verbally. They're functional and useful at the time and help us to survive the unbearable feelings of the abandonment melange or mixture. Unfortunately, we are typically forced to rely on food soothing for so long that this over dispense is extremely difficult to overcome. And I do not recommend that anyone in early recovery make their primary focus unless they have a life-threatening food issue. Instead, I prefer to recommend Dr. Mate's harm reduction approach. Additionally, Geneen's Roth's, or spelled Geneen, last name Roth's, Roth, book, Breaking Free from Compulsive Eating, also offers a moderate and sensible approach to dietary improvement. While many survivors can be unconscious of their damaging eating habits, I have met various survivors who take it to the opposite extreme. I once was in the ranks of those who obsessively over-focused on dietary self-help, hoping and expecting that all their suffering will be resolved if they can just find the perfect diet. Or, let's be real, find that perfect body, right? Many also chase after every new highly touted supplement in this pursuit. Some of us also approach exercise in this manner. I wish I had a little bit of that. These are understandable but simplistic versions of the salvation fantasy and are typically pursued at the exclusion of working on more core issues of recovery, such as your physical, emotional, and mental patterns. I prefer to recommend Mate's harm reduction approach, where we already read that. While many survivors can be unconscious of their damaging eating habits, I have met, they go to the opposite extreme. That's where we were. There are understandable but simplistic versions of the salvation fantasy and are typically pursued at the exclusion of working on more core issues of recovery. Nonetheless, almost everyone has some ideas about how they can eat and exercise more healthily. My recommendation is to try dietary adjustments when you can on a moderate, doable level. And that, ladies and gents, is the end of chapter 2 of this book. And we will continue next time with chapter 3. Here's a big one: improving relationships. So stay tuned for that one. Namaste, loved ones. Buenas noches.